Hey everybody, and welcome to The Breakthrough Effect. I'm your host, Jerrid Sebesta. I've had two successful careers. First, I was an award-winning TV meteorologist, and then a financial marketing strategist. I was living the dream, making good money, but inside I was craving for something more, something bigger. So I stopped deferring life and I started creating exactly the life I was searching for. I doubled down on unlearning old mindsets and creating big breakthroughs for me and my family. And now I'm bringing that same transformation to you. Let's understand the rules of this game. Let's get clarity. Let's stop chasing and start becoming. This is the Breakthrough Effect.
But how come when my wife says that one thing, it all disappears and I feel like that 6-year-old boy who's stupid? How come the truth just disappears when I'm triggered? Again, the hot stove, right? Something happens, it triggers a nervous system response, and it hijacks all the good stuff you know.
All right, today on The Breakthrough Effect, I am talking with Mark Odland, a licensed marriage and family therapist who has discovered that the biggest barrier to breakthrough isn't lack of strategy or effort. It is unhealed trauma, insecurities, and emotional cages that keep high-achieving men trapped despite outward success. As the founder of Lion Counseling and co-founder of Northwoods Christian Counseling, Mark specializes in EMDR therapy, a powerful approach that heals memories and emotional barriers at their source permanently. Get ready for a breakthrough conversation that will challenge everything you think you know about trauma, masculinity, and what it takes to become the lion that you were born to be. Please welcome to the show, Mark Odland. Welcome to the show today.
Jerrid, thank you. It's so great to meet you, and I won't bore the audience, but there's kind of this cool mutual friend connection, and I'm glad we discovered each other. I'm happy to be on the podcast. Honored that you asked me.
Excited, yeah. EMDR, harder to spit out than what I thought.
Doesn't roll off the tongue, yeah.
It doesn't. Hey, I want to get things started off right off the bat here. Let's just jump right in. So, trauma. I'm interested to hear, what is your definition of that? And then a quick follow-up. How do people know that they even have it in their life?
Great question. I mean, what I find, and it sounds like we have a similar audience, people that we work with. I work with a lot of high-achieving guys, a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, physicians, doctors, those kinds of guys. And they might be crushing it at work, or at least it seems like it, but then they're hitting a wall. Their, behaviors are coming up that are kind of causing some stress on the home front, perhaps, maybe feeling a little burned out. Things start to sneak up on them, right? And all the hard work and just kind of plowing forward and just crushing those emails, doing the strategy, putting in the hours, what worked for decades maybe isn't working quite so well anymore, right? And that's how they tend to find me and our team at Lion. But what is trauma? Trauma is essentially going through an experience in life, right? And from an EMDR perspective, what happens is, even though we might be able to process through 90% of the tough stuff that happens to us, right? We might talk about it, we might have a weird dream that night, we might feel a little stressed, but let's be honest, if we became traumatized by everything we saw on the news, we would be like laying on the ground in the fetal position, paralyzed and unable to face life. So our brains can filter things, right? They can filter out things, they can process things, they can detach from things. But every so often, we go through something where either our physical safety or our emotional safety is threatened in a legitimate way. And what happens is our brain kind of freeze frames that experience in a way that's different, in a way that's kind of frozen in time, right? And that leads to your second question, is how do we know if we have it? So what we do is we deconstruct by working backwards, right? So what you do is you figure out what's causing problems in your life, essentially. And oftentimes that has to do with an unpleasant emotion. And usually there's a negative belief or a lie that goes with that emotion. Right? So the guy who's crushing it at work, on paper, he's a huge success, but his deepest fear is, I'm a fake, I'm a fraud, it's all going to fall apart at a moment's notice. People are going to see that I'm a failure, or I'm not good enough, right? It's happened so much that it's almost not an exception to the rule. It almost is the rule now. Guys who are doing really well on the outside often have this kind of ghost of I'm not good enough. That they've been running away from their whole life, and it's worked pretty well, right? So you find out the areas where you're struggling or where you're oversensitive. And then usually your nervous system is oversensitized to a certain feeling, situation, because of kind of the muscle memory of the brain knows, I felt that before. And so I'm going to be ready, right? So the last thing I'll say, Jerrid, about that is, as a dad, right? You tell your kids, don't touch the hot stove, right? If they do, and if they find out, they have what I call a hot stove moment, right? There's physical pain involved, there's shock. The brain bookmarks that experience and says, to stay safe in the future, don't touch a hot stove. But what we do is we experience trauma oftentimes as kids. We have a hot stove moment, and because we don't have the intelligence of an adult yet, we make associations that are too broad. Things that aren't actually hot stoves become hot stoves. They feel like hot stoves. It feels dangerous when it's not, right? So basically, the memory gets stuck. We think it's dormant. We think we've moved past it. We think we've worked our way out of it. But when it gets poked, the original sight, sounds, beliefs, emotions leak out, and we don't even know where it's coming from. We just know we're having a disproportional emotional response.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you right, it's like the brain's inability, because I think if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, your brain and your body can generally handle certain amounts of trauma, but there's something that is powerful or hits a certain way that allows you, and it creates these connections from an emotion, from an experience that keeps people locked in. So again, I'm kind of answering my own question. Yeah. It doesn't have to be quite traumatic, because when I think of trauma, I'm thinking a car accident, like some massive. It doesn't have to be that way to be suffering, air quotes, from trauma.
It doesn't. I mean, and this EMDR therapy that I'm certified in is amazing for those things. Like if someone gets a car accident, combat, gets mugged, police officers, EMTs, EMDR is amazing for that. You can knock out a lot of trauma with just 1 or 2 sessions, which is almost too good to be true, which is crazy. But more often, here's an example. I'm working with a CEO who's been doing really well, but now all of a sudden he's starting to feel more and more panicky when he has to present in front of the board. And he's not sure where it's coming from, but he knows it feels very tenuous. And so we take a session or two, get to know each other, hear his story, learn where he came from, what shaped him. And then I do something called the float back technique. And I didn't invent it, but we use it all the time in EMDR, right? And I'll have the guy say, okay, when you think about being in the boardroom, just close your eyes. Notice what you're feeling, what you're thinking. What's the lie? What's the negative belief that pops up for you when you think about being in the boardroom? And what do you see? What's the picture? What's the worst part of it? Oh man, I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking about them staring at me, and I'm just imagining forgetting what to say. And what's the lie that goes with that? I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot, right? Okay. I say, okay, do you feel that right now when you're talking about it? Yeah. Usually it's in the heart or in the gut. And I'll say, all right, okay, I want you to just close your eyes, think about the boardroom, think about those words, I'm an idiot. Think about that feeling in your heart. Just notice it. And now without overthinking, I just want you to drift back in time to an earlier time in life, maybe even as a kid, where you felt something kind of like that. 9 times out of 10, there's something. And they'll just be like, oh man, I haven't thought about that in years. I was in first grade, and I had to try to count to 100 in front of the class, and I just froze, and everyone laughed at me. That's stupid. That was so long ago. Why is that even? That's not a thing, right? And like, no, it's a thing. And we target that memory with EMDR, 1 session. Knock it out. The brain is able to reintegrate the memory. The D in EMDR is desensitize the memory, so the oversensitive emotions and images get numbed down, get calmed down. And then the brain actually spontaneously, because the brain is awesome and it can heal like miraculously by itself. It's the way God wired it, whatever, but once you pop that bubble of stuck memory, now the brain can finally grab onto truth, perspective, insight, and actually link it into the memory itself. So you basically get a software update for the brain. And you know the memory is healed, which is crazy. But I go toward the end of the session, I say, okay, now go back to that original memory, being in first grade. It started as an 8 out of 10 for how emotional it felt. How does it feel now? It's crazy. It's calm. Like 0 out of 10 calm. And what's the truth about that kid, about you? Is he really a failure? Is he stupid? He's just a kid. He's just a kid. I can't believe that they all laughed at me and I couldn't tell my parents. I just lived with that all these years. So what's the truth? The truth is I was just a kid, and I'm actually pretty smart.
Yeah.
How true does that feel in here? Feels true. Sweet. And that sticks. And at the next session, we check back on the memory, and the gains have held, right? So what I tell people is, like, all the stuff that, like, you teach guys and gals to level up in life is so good. It's so important and so meaningful. But if you're someone who's been putting all this into practice and you just kind of keep hitting these roadblocks and you're not sure what they are, and it has to do with that emotional realm,
yeah,
it's a good question to ask if there could be unhealed trauma that through no fault of your own is just getting in the way.
Sure.
And then once that, kind of like a log jam in a river, once that's removed, then things can flow freely again.
Right. Yeah. I definitely connect to this because, you don't know my story, at least not yet, but
no.
There was a big transformational moment I had just over 4 years ago. And I can relate all of my personal growth and all of the things back to that moment, and what that moment triggered in me was really reshaping what I believe about my life. And then all of a sudden the cap started coming off, right? And so that's where I truly believe, like, it really does start on the inner game. If you want to transform your outer world, you must transform your inner game. And I know that you'll believe that. You brought up a couple of things. You brought up your brain, your mind. You talked about your nervous system, right? Yep. If you can rewind go upstream, does it all begin with a belief system, because your beliefs then dictate your emotions, and then that gets your nervous system all out of whack? Does it always come back to a belief?
That's a really good question, and you probably know that different schools of psychotherapy have different opinions on this, different emphasis, right? So cognitive behavioral therapy was amazing at discovering this connection that you're describing, and that if you can somehow get a handle on your beliefs and really put them in check and dissect your beliefs and get them in line, then hopefully your feelings will match those beliefs, your thoughts, and follow, right? What I found in EMDR is maybe a little more nuanced than that, in the sense that I found that a belief and a painful emotion often are tied together. And it's almost like two sides of the coin. And so when I'm doing that float back technique that I described to you, sometimes I'll actually blend them together into one statement and say, when you notice that I'm an idiot feeling inside, where do you feel that in your body? It's almost like the belief feeling combo that usually is fused together. And that's why it's so painful, because if a negative belief is just a negative belief, but it was just like a piece of data floating around, okay. But it's because it carries that weight of fear, shame, doubt, anxiety, stress. That's why it gets our attention, right? So I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah. I sometimes, people listen to what I have to say and they're like, I like what you have to say. I'm trying to be more positive. I just want to be, I'm trying to really focus on being a more positive person. And then my only rebuttal, and I don't mean like rebuttal like I'm arguing, but I'm like, this is what I'm suggesting is deeper. And obviously I think you would agree. This goes down to kind of almost the soul level. Like it's really a healing of something deep that is, and I love the word, like you could upgrade the software. That is the key. I mean, it sounds like we're talking about movies in the Matrix, but you if you can upgrade the software on the mainframe, you really now can unlock something that you never thought was possible.
That's a powerful way to put it, Jerrid, because, back to the example of the guy in the boardroom, it's not uncommon when someone goes through EMDR therapy to have a guy go through that session. We knock out the memory in first grade, and then he comes back 2 weeks later and he says, It sounds crazy, Mark, but actually I've had 2 meetings since then.
Yeah.
I felt calm. Well, what do you mean? We didn't even work on the boardroom stuff. But we did, because the common thread that unites the boardroom and first grade was the belief of I'm stupid. Back to what you said about beliefs. And a belief that, like the hot stove, that is the worst feeling in the world. That's a foundational pain in my life. I'm going to spend my whole life constructing a way of being in the world to avoid that feeling of being stupid. So what happens when you eliminate that lie at its core? Now you start to be freed up, to not be reactive, to not have to avoid things. And the last thing I'll say about that, when you talk about the soul level, I mean, a lot of the guys that I see kind of are looking for that faith-based perspective too. I mean, I work with all kinds of guys, but one of the beautiful things about EMDR therapy is it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So it looks super goofy. We target a memory. I have you pull it up and think about the lie and the worst image and the feelings in your body, and then we do a 30-second set of eye movements where you're just free associating. I step to the side and I move my finger back and hand back and forth like this. And something about the left-right brain thing, or the kind of halfway in the trauma and halfway multitasking in the room, it desensitizes all the intense negative stuff. And again, it opens up the brain to positive stuff. But after like 30 seconds, I'll stop, have them take a breath, and I'll say, what are you noticing now? And people will say things like, oh, that's weird. I thought about this other memory that was kind of like it. Okay, cool. Go with that. Another set of 30 seconds. No talking, just free associating, just noticing. Like being on a train, looking out the window, and you're just kind of watching the scenery go by, right? Stop the set, take another breath. What's coming up now? Oh, that's weird. I feel a lot calmer. Cool. All right, notice that. See what happens next. Another set. So it just rolls along like that, very organically. But for my faith-based guys, sometimes there'll be a place in the session where they feel a little stuck, right? It's like that. They're stuck in like that frozen in time, like the first grader. He just feels like, I don't know, I still feel stupid. So that's when sometimes I get to do the art behind the mechanics of EMDR, right? And for my faith-based guys, it'll be like, all right, well, you told me about how important your faith is, right? So if somehow, Jesus were like in that classroom with you and put his arm around that little boy, like, what do you think he would have said? What do you think he would have done? We're using our creativity here, right? I'm not claiming that I can, conjure God to like come down and just like do something at my, snap of my fingers. But there's this mysterious line between where what people believe by faith and what the creativity of the brain can do. They have this very powerful moment where I'll do that next 30-second set after saying something like that. And then they start, shed a tear. They just, their shoulders drop. And they're, okay, man, what are you noticing now? Yeah, I just imagined like Jesus gave me a big hug and just said like, hey, I'm proud of you. You're just a kid. You're just learning. It's okay to make mistakes. And then you go back to the original memory, and here's the cool part. Now he can't see all the kids laughing at him and pointing fingers. Now the memory itself has changed, where all he can think about is just getting that hug from Jesus. And critics will say, well, what are you doing? Are you brainwashing people? Are you erasing memories? Are you like trying to...
Are you hypnotizing him? What are you doing?
Hypnotizing him, right? And the amazing thing is, if I asked him, I want you to write down on a piece of paper everything that actually happened historically in that memory, he could still tell you everything that happened. But when he pulls up the file in his brain, now it's stored differently. And it's calmer, it's peaceful, there's a positive image that's replaced the negative image. There you go.
Yeah.
Freedom.
I'm glad you explained kind of what EMDR was. I was going to ask you about that. I'm faintly familiar with it, so now our listeners kind of know. I've also heard how it's kind of like a brain reset in a lot of ways, and there's other therapies that do that, because some people are stuck in life, or are just, they're not just stuck. They're not just stuck high achievers. They're just really, really stuck. It's because their brain it's not firing right, like where the left and brain side of the brains are not communicating correctly. I've heard EMDR can help that alleviate, but I want to hear your more opinion on that. But Also, too, again,
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated about how like therapy and the personal development world is really overlapping with the faith world nowadays. I'm
Yeah.
seeing more of that. I find that fascinating because I feel like those two worlds used to be separate. It was like Tony Robbins and then the
Yeah.
preacher. And now you're watching these
I
people come
know.
together and you're watching what I believe biblical truth being literally, not to use the word, but manifested through like scientific therapies. And what's the result? People are being set free. They're operating without ease. Their mind and their body and their
Yes.
spirit are operating as one. And guess what? Their realities start changing. Opportunities that are now coming out of nowhere are happening, right? So like talk about like how EMDR can kind of reset the brain and how you're watching this thing kind of overlap with faith nowadays.
Yeah, that's such a good observation, Jerrid. I think and I think we're kind of like playing catch up a little bit because I think we're experiencing that, but there are actually interesting challenges that poses too. Because I sometimes in the faith communities, as much as I love them, there can be kind of this over spiritualization of everything.
Right. Yeah.
Right, and because mental health seems to exist in the same place where faith exists, it just feels like if I just I mean, this is a caricature, but like there's vibes. There's vibes sometimes that if you just read your Bible a little bit more, just prayed a little bit more, you should be able to get over this. And like it's a willpower thing, like it's a faith thing. And so what I do is I say to people, yes, some of that's true. The mind is not the same as the brain, but the brain's kind of important, and it's an organ in our body. And if you like literally shattered your femur, like in a car accident, yeah, you're going to pray, but you're also going to get the bone set, and you're going to get it stitched up, and you're going to get cast on your leg so that once things are aligned correctly, it can heal the right way. And that in itself is a miracle. That's a miracle.
Right.
We get injured in these mortal bodies, and somehow, as long as it doesn't get infected or messed up too bad, it's like just going to miraculously regenerate. It's like, what? That's amazing. And our brains actually can do the same thing if the barriers are removed, right? So I just tell people, don't think of trauma as a moral failing. Think of it as the broken femur, and get the right intervention if needed. And the other thing I'll say too is I'm not claiming that EMDR is like the be-all end-all. It's a very specific intervention for specific trauma, right? And so what I find is guys who have done a lot of personal development work already, when they do EMDR, man, it's already primed. Like they are ready to, they have this reservoir of tools and insights and truth. Why is
that? Is it because typically people who are down the personal development route are like super aware of their thoughts already? Is that why? I'm curious.
Well, I think what happens is it gets them so far, but if they have a certain degree of trauma in their life, the truth can't get from the head to the heart.
Okay, so it's like a hardware upgrade or a software. It's like the ultimate upgrade that is the thing that unlocks it.
Yeah, so the guy can do a mantra and say, I'm smart, I'm competent, I'm good enough, and Jesus loves me, and he's got great plans for me, and I believe it. Right now, I believe it. But how come when my wife says that one thing, it all disappears, and I feel like that 6-year-old boy who's stupid?
Interesting.
How come the truth just disappears when I'm triggered? And I know the word trigger is overused these days, but let's just keep using that word. Again, the hot stove, right? Something happens, it triggers a nervous system response, and it hijacks all the good stuff you know. And so after EMDR, all that learning for all those years that those guys have done, now it just syncs up. It's like, it's not that it wasn't valuable. It's incredibly valuable. It's just that trauma kept it from going the last mile. Sure. If that makes sense.
And now the cap's off, right? And now it can do what it's supposed to do on all levels, right?
Exactly.
Let's turn this more practical. Okay, so all right. I think that you're hitting the head, hitting the nail on the head, right? Because I'm sure there's people listening to this. I am, right? Like I'm crushing it. Like, dude, my week is going fantastic, and bam, my daughter says something, and I'm triggered. Now, like in an hour, how did that happen? In an hour, I went from crushing it to like now, everybody knows everybody has experienced that. So obviously without coming to see you and going through some sort of therapy like this, but like what is something tangible that we can do? Get more curious, ask more questions. What would that be to try to get to the bottom of it?
That's a great question. I think the first step would be to to ask the question, where am I most sensitive, oversensitive? You don't have to admit it to anyone. Just like, hey, between me and myself and maybe God, it's like, let's be honest. Like, where am I oversensitive? That came from somewhere. Like typically that comes from some place, probably an unhealed wound. And it doesn't. And the other thing I have to tell people is the practical step of this is, there's great books. The inventor of EMDR, her name was Francine Shapiro. She created a book called Getting Past Your Past. And that has a lot of practical EMDR related self-help techniques to kind of help prime the pump and kind of get the ball rolling with those things. I wrote a book called Escape the Cage, which is my own way of telling that story to the guys I work with of how they might recognize that in themselves and in what their next steps could be. I mean, you could do the float back on yourself what I just did with, as an example. You could find a quiet space, actually really let yourself sit with the uncomfortable feeling, belief, image, maybe say a little prayer if you're a man of faith, and then float it back. Where's this coming from? Wow. And sometimes there's one in college, then one in high school, then there's one from elementary. It can be like a staggered thing, and lies reinforce themselves over time. So we tend to collect evidence for the lie, right?
It's like a self-perpetuating machine that you don't want to keep building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, you're not signing your life away if you decide, like, hey, let's check out this EMDR thing. A typical guy meets with me for 10 to 20 sessions. So it's not years of therapy. It's like a very specific intervention. If you had like everyone's got their wounds, but if you had like a decent childhood, say, whatever decent means, right?
Right.
Even loving parents can't meet all our needs, right? Stuff happens. Life can be hard. But if you had a quote unquote decent childhood, you could still go in and do 10 sessions of EMDR, knock out the worst stuff that ever happened to you, get that software or hardware upgrade, and then just feel like, okay, I took care of that junk, right? I took care of that junk. Now I feel like I am a little more, have more clear vision facing what's ahead, right? So it's different in that way. But if you're used to talk therapy or coaching, it'll feel different. That's for sure. It's very, very focused. Yeah.
You said find out what you're sensitive to.
Yeah.
I mean, dumb question. How do we know? I mean, how do we know what we're sensitive to? Is that a trigger or a feeling of anxiety or a memory comes up and it's like, bam, now I can feel my nervous system is elevated. Like how do we even understand what that is?
Yeah, I would say wherever you find the most excess negative emotion stirring up in your life, right? So like when you ask someone, you're asking a buddy, how was your week? Or we're doing highs and lows at the dinner table with the kids. Whatever those lows are, they're lows because probably there's an intense negative emotion that's attached to that experience, and that's how we define it as a low, right? So it's going to be or like a spike on the volume, like you're driving in your car and your kid just turns up the volume on the radio all the way, and it's like, whoa, what just happened, right? What are those moments? Is it arguing over chores with your spouse? Is it when you get that email from your boss and you're like, oh no? Or is it whatever it is? It could be shame. Typically, it's going to be anxiety, shame, fear. Those tend to be the big ones. Yeah.
It was interesting. I was just having a conversation with a gentleman yesterday, and he was like, my boss said something that really triggered me. He basically said that I'm not working hard enough, and it really, really triggered me. It really bothered me. I was bothered by it by the rest of the day. And I asked him the question, I said, why does that bother you so bad? And he's like, I got to give him a lot of credit. He was very transparent. He's like, I felt unworthy. And I said, well, that's interesting, because I go, how does somebody have that kind of power? You know what I mean? Like that person, he doesn't have the ability to make you feel unworthy. So that trigger is something actually buried within inside of you, true or false. What would you say to that, Mark?
I would say it's buried. I would say there's something buried because another way that you can find out where you're most sensitive is where you're most defensive. If you recognize within yourself that when it comes to certain subjects or certain people, you have a hard time receiving constructive feedback / criticism, chances are it's poking an old wound. And if that guy got that I'm unworthy thing healed up, then guess what? Now his boss can say, hey, I don't think you're working hard enough. And that guy can take a deep breath and say, that doesn't feel great, but I don't feel unworthy. Is he right? Like, maybe he's right, maybe he's not.
And that's actually what I said to him. I go, maybe he's right. Maybe that's why it's bothering you, because he's correct, but maybe not. You know?
Right. And then that's also where the spiritual stuff comes in too, because even in one sense, if we're unworthy because we're broken people in this fallen world, that's not the full story. The full story is we're also full of gifts and talents, and we're created in God's image, and that has to also be able to be present with that feeling to give it like a well-rounded, full truth, right?
Right. What's the biggest lie? You know, you've worked with high achievers.
Yeah.
Again, people from all over the spectrum, but especially people like that are like, again, appear to be crushing it. Like what is that belief system that it kind of, I don't want to say shocks you, but the most common one that's like, man, this one always comes up.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's two. It's either I'm a failure or I'm unlovable or worthless or something like that. So, you know, in EMDR, we typically have these categories of what we call negative cognitions or negative beliefs. Some have to do with control or safety, like I'm out of control, I'm helpless, and some have to do with the defective category. I'm unworthy, I'm bad, I'm unlovable, right? Those tend to be the deepest ones, the deepest pain points for people. Yeah.
I love this conversation. We could definitely go longer if we needed to. I want to start to pin it right now, if we don't mind. But one more question I want to ask you, and I typically will try to end interviews like this. But speak directly to that guy or gal, high achiever, stuck, everything in between, who has that life, and they maybe even know it. Like where you either feel like life is out of control or I don't feel worthy. I see that a lot. Out of people that you would not expect it.
For sure.
If you could literally go and, upload one belief into their mainframe or the software, what would be the truth that you would install in their minds?
Yeah. Well, I would just look at them and I'd say, first of all, you are an incredibly resilient person. Like you have overcome so much to get to this point in life. But even the strongest people, even the hardest workers, the most disciplined people, we have hurts, we have wounds. And that doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean something's inherently wrong with you. It just means something might be out of alignment. It's like that bone that never healed the right way. And that you're worthy of deeper healing if there are a couple pockets in your life where that just never healed up the right way. Your toughness, your resilience, your faith has gotten you this far. But man, it shouldn't feel like such hard work all the time. It shouldn't feel this exhausting. And freedom is not gritting your teeth, right? And just pushing forward. It's actually letting the shoulders drop, a sigh of relief, a feeling of peace. Not forever. Life is hard. Life has its ups and downs. But we want your baseline to be more peaceful. We want your nervous system to be able to reset. And there is a way forward, right? So I would just say there's hope. I'd say that if you're curious about if there's trauma in my life that needs to heal, we at Lion, we do a clarity call where we try to see if it's a good fit and see if it's the right investment to make for people. And if not, they'll point you in a different direction and try to help get you where you need to go. But that's what I'd say. Yeah,
it's a great word. I think that this resonates with a lot of people because, again, the answer to having more and to being more successful, which I don't think is a problem. I think that we should desire more.
Yeah,
isn't to grind more and to grind ourselves into the corner where our life actually starts going backwards and we have less peace. And I challenge people, all the time, and I'll challenge people again listening now. Yeah. Can you have more but yet have more peace? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Can you have more peace and have more clarity and freedom? Yes. Yes, you can. It doesn't have to come at a cost. And if you feel like it's coming at a cost, there's something awry, because I think God created us to continue to co-create with him and take more dominion, but he's not asking us to take that at the cost of our peace and our freedom and our marriage and our relationships and our physical health right? So we just scratched the surface today, Mark. I appreciate that. Again, you gave a little background as to like where people can find you, but is there a website or a Twitter handle or a Instagram handle people can find you?
Yeah, so the website is escapethecagenow.com. We got the caged lion metaphor going on. We got a lot of lions who feel a little caged up for whatever reason. We kind of help them bust loose or realize the door's already open. They just kind of need to walk out. A podcast that I co-host with called the Lion Counseling Podcast. You can just search that up on YouTube.
If this conversation sparks something in you, don't let it fade. Please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Don't forget to connect with me online as well. Follow me at Jerrid Sebesta on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, or dive deeper at my website, jerridsebesta.com, where all my free trainings and resources are waiting for you. And remember, stop chasing the life you want and start becoming. This is the Breakthrough Effect. We'll see you next time.